Well, hello. It's time for another exciting episode of Pens in Use. This is the show where I talk about the fountain pens and inks I've been using throughout the week. So, let's dive into it. If videos like this interest you, where I talk about fountain pens both new and old and at all price points, I would invite you to subscribe. And I got a story to tell you after this is done, a little story of a woman who got sent to jail for sedition in southwestern South Dakota. So hang on for that. But first, I made a mistake last week, and I think it's important to rectify it in as public a way, or more public a way than I made it. So I misidentified a group of people who were protesting when I talked about the Nicholas Sandman thing last week. 2 weeks ago, sorry. And the group should have been identified as Black Hebrew Israelites. So I put a link to them in the video description. Not to them, a link about them. we don't want to link to them on this channel, but a link about them if you want to learn more. And I put the same link and a correction up in the corner of the video right when I misidentified the group. So hopefully that fixes it. I really hate making that kind of mistake. So let's take a look at some pens. So these are the pens I've been using this week and last week because, as I said, I loaned out my equipment. But anyway, all right, so from left to right, we have the Pilot Explorer, the SHAffer Icon, SHAffer Legacy 2. Compare those two designs, by the way. Then we have the SHAffer Kylo pen, Cross Townsend, Lamy Safari, Diplomat Student Pen, Lamy 2000, which is in its closing days as a daily writer, as I go into summer where it always takes a break, Montblanc, Monterrosa Turquoise, and finally a Monterosa Hexagon, which, interestingly enough, I've never done a video on the Hexagon. So I think that'll be coming up soon. Have to do a full review because I know I've shown it on the channel before. So let's take a look at how they write. As always, I'll be writing with the Bomo Art Journal. I'm sorry. As always, I'll be writing with my Cognitive Surplus Notebook, seafood flavored edition. And Michael, yes, I do have to name what the paper is, because pen people care about that stuff. Alright, so my first pen is this Pilot Explorer. Kind of a lightweight pen. I tried to purchase a different SHAffer, and I was not allowed to purchase it. They said they could not deliver it to my address, so I went for this Pilot Explorer instead. And it's a lightweight pen, but very attractive. Has the same nib as a Pilot Kakuno or Pilot Metropolitan. But the difference is very lightweight body. So this is the Pilot Explorer. This has a medium nib. And the ink in it is Parker Quink. Washable blue. Whoops, washable. Okay, that was just a mess. Washable blue, there we go. We'll just pretend that didn't happen. So, of course, Parker Quink washable blue is pretty ordinary blue ink. Remarkable mostly because it's washable, and it's from Parker. It's one you can trust in your vintage pens. Probably even trust on your vintage clothing. My next pen is the SHAffer Icon. One neat thing I discovered since I inked it up. Do you hear that? I'll put it by the microphone. I think there are lead weights in it. Weights of some kind. Oh, take that back. I don't know if you can see back there. My lighting is not the best for looking back the pen, but there's some kind of a spring back there, so I don't know what it is, but interesting. So this is a SHAffer Icon. It has a fine nib on it. And this is the one that came with a cartridge already installed, which was just Jim Dandy. The pen is almost empty, partly because I've been kind of forcing myself to use it up. Partly because I found that, on cheap notebook paper, which I was doing a lot of writing with the last week or so, it's actually handles that paper very well. In any case, there you go. Now I think a pen that looks very similar is this 1990s SHAffer Legacy 2. Yeah, I know it's chrome and all that jazz, but very similar. That hard start was my fault. SHAffer Legacy 2. Of course, has a medium nib. And the ink in this one is Rohrer and Klingner. Salix, which is one of their iron gall inks. I like it. It's just a fairly plain blue, but the iron gall thing gives it a little bit of color change. Not as exciting as some other iron gall inks I've used, but at least it's something. And, oops, that was messy. That's just kind of a nice shade of blue. And hey, let's get some more Parker Quink washable blue in this before we switch to other things. So this is my Kylo pen, kind of on its last gasps of ink. You'd probably like to see it writing. So SHAffer Kylo Ren has a medium nib on it. I haven't built up any more enthusiasm to see the movie. But anyway, we have Parker Quink. Washable blue. So that's a whole lot of blue inks. Two of them are the exact same ink. I know that SHAffer and Parker are not owned by the same company, so I'm fairly certain that their two inks are different. I have open windows, so if you heard that dog make that weird and gasping, barking noise, sorry. It is kind of nice to finally have windows open. I mean, how long ago was it I was reporting about a blizzard? So, nice change. This pen is a very, very, very attractive cross Townsend, and I just fell hard for this pen. And, for years I've thought nothing of cross. I haven't even thought to try one. And then I got this pen. What? What is this? So this is the cross Townsend. And it has a medium nib on it. And the ink in it is Atramentis. Apple Blossom, which is a scented ink and has a scent. I don't know how much it reminds me of apple blossoms, but hey, it's a scent. Actually, it kind of makes me think of Matahari's Cordial, a Noodler's ink that I happen to like. I don't know if it's... Well, I know it's not quite the same color because I have for my own personal edification, have compared them, but kind of scratches that same itch. You haven't seen this pen on the channel before, but you've seen others of its make. This is a Lamy Safari. This was given to me by Proto Pens in an order that I'd placed. And yeah, they said they hoped they'd see it on my channel one day. And it's been a couple of years, but here it is, Proto Pens. That hard start was my fault. The Lamy Safari is a good pen. It's just not my personal favorite. So Lamy Safari, this has a medium nib on it. And the ink in it is a discontinued ink. It's a Iroshizuku Tsukushi. And this is one that I'm pushing hard to use up, so I'm just going to keep refilling pens with it till it's used up, because I have this aim of having fewer bottles of ink, and this is an easy target. So I'm going for the jugular. Those smaller bottles are easy to use up quickly, and that's what I'm going to do. You know, build up a bunch of small victories while the larger victories just sort of happen. All right, this is an interesting one. This is the Diplomat Student Pen. Now I'll tell you why it's interesting. I've been struggling what the heck to put in it. First thing I put in it was a cross cartridge. But I had tried a cross converter and it just wouldn't fill. So I filled it. I filled the converter and then put it in the pen. And it worked beautifully. Did you see that? That's an ink leak. Oh, more ink leaks. What's going on here? Oh, ink all over. Oh, ink up here. Ink, 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 ink. All along this converter. So I'll tell you what happened. The converter was great. Up until it was almost empty, and then bloop! Ink everywhere inside the pen. So, I'm not sure what to make of that, but it's definitely a problem. So maybe cross converters aren't the answer. And I had the same problem with the cross cartridge too. So this is a Diplomat Student Pen. Oops, across the D, not the T. This has an A-type nib, which is a fancy name for student. And the ink in it is Colorverse Golden Record. So you can see it's still writing beautifully, but you know, when it gets almost empty, it's got a leaking problem. So we're just going to do the horizontals. This time we'll do the horizontals. Those are verticals I did before. My diagonals. And my cross hatching. But anyway, kind of a disappointment that it leaks when it's almost empty, and I can't figure out why. Why do you wait till you're almost empty and then bloop everywhere? This pen will be taking a hibernation for the summer. This is my beautiful, beautiful Lamy 2000. Hemingway Jones did a video recently about the Pilot Custom 823, which is another pen that I really enjoy. So I may be inking that up next to replace this one. So this is the Lamy 2000 with a fine nib. And the ink in it is Parker Quink. Not washable blue. Black. Which is not the darkest black ink in the world, but who cares? I find Parker Quink Black to be a very reliable ink, and you know, part of why I was using it in this pen is just to use it up, but part of me is thinking, well, I want to have it around, so I'm going to have to rush through the rest of my black ink so I can get back to using this one. I think I like this one better than the Pelican Black I was using, or the Lamy Black, which is the winner of my black video. Alright, and then we have my Monteverde Turquoise. Or, sorry, Montblanc Monterrosa Turquoise. This is the student branch of their business. Because, yeah, they used to have a student branch of their business. Wonderful pen. I enjoy it so much. So this is a Montblanc Monterosa Turquoise. I think it's a fine nib. And the ink in it is Pilot Blue Black. And I'll be honest, this ink was my gateway into blues and blue blacks, because until this pen or this bottle, I'd never had much interest in either color. You know, it's got kind of that formaldehyde smell, but what the hey. Oh, that's really uneven. It's a nice color. And there you go. And finally, this last pen is a kind of a treat. I'll tell you why. This last pen is one I've had for several years. I always thought I'd done a review on it, but I can't find the review, and I finally realized that, oh, you did film a review of it many years ago, back before the pandemic. I had a lot of my reviews. This is before I went into the cloud. But I had a lot of my reviews on a single hard drive. And said hard drive had a nasty collision with my basement floor, because I used to film my videos down there, and ceased to work. So this pen, yes, I have filmed a video on it, but it never got published because I destroyed it. Or destroyed the video, not the pen. So this is a Monteverde. I'm sorry, I keep saying Monteverde tonight. Montblanc Monterosa. It's, flip this up here. Little the worse for wear. We got some tooth marks and whatnot, but hey, Hexagon. Hexagon. So it's kind of a fun pen. I'm thinking, well, since it's way too late to film the first impressions of this puppy, it might be time to just film a plain ordinary review. And I had a comment actually within the last week or two that, well, you don't do reviews anymore, and you're right, because they were always more work. But it might be time to do another one. And, you know, I need to go back and start revisiting these pens I've been doing first impressions of. Some of them are never going to see the light of day again. But some like this one are just, wow. Hexagon. And the ink in it is not visible. There we go. Colorverse. Interstellar Space. Oop, that was a railroad. That was a railroad. Okay. So I can't push it too wide. Or if I do, I need to slow down a bit. Anyway, to get my swatch in, vertical strokes, horizontal strokes, diagonal cross-hatching, and vertical and horizontal cross-hatching. And there we go, the Montblanc Monterosa Hexagon. Kind of a fun little pen that's got to get its video made again. So those are the pens and inks I've been using this week. And I used a couple of them to write myself some notes because I want to tell you a little bit of a story. And I just turned to the wrong story. I want to talk about something that happened in southwestern South Dakota. So 2 weeks ago, I talked about social media and its toxic effects. And I came down pretty hard on social media. But there's another side to that, which we can see happening in Russia right now and certain other countries in the world. What happens when we squash the dialogue? Yeah, it can get toxic at times. There are people who lie and say horrible things. Well, it wasn't social media, but this country, my country, the United States of America, experimented with this. So I want to tell you a little story that takes place during the First World War. So the Espionage Act, and there was also a Sedition Act, but she was charged under the Espionage Act, of 1917 was enacted 2 months after the United States entered the First World War. And I should just note that we had a president then who had campaigned on the slogan, "He kept us out of the war." But what the Espionage Act did is it prohibited obtaining information, recording pictures, or in any way sharing information that could be used for the injury of the United States or the advantage of any foreign nation. More to the point in this story, it created criminal penalties for anyone who obstructed enlistment in the armed forces, caused insubordination or disloyalty in military or naval forces. Now, portions of this have been repealed, but it is worth noting that Julian Assange was actually indicted under this act. So in 1917, Kate O'Hare was an orator and an activist who toured the nation. And I said she came to southwestern North Dakota. She came to a little town in very southwestern North Dakota called Bowman on July 17th of 1917 and gave this same speech. She was then arrested on July 29th, 1917 in the city of Devil's Lake under the charge that she had interfered with the draft. She was sentenced to 5 years hard labor at the Missouri State Penitentiary in 1919, and then was officially pardoned in 1920 after a nationwide campaign to free her. The statement that got her arrested may or may not have been in her speech. Accounts vary. And of course, it was 1917 in rural North Dakota. Nobody had a cell phone whoopsie, I recorded that. Nobody had one of those back then. Probably no recording devices, maybe a newspaper photo, that would have been about it. So here's the quote. Any person enlisted in the Army of the United States for service in France would be used for fertilizer, and that is all he was good for. And that the women of the United States were nothing more or less than brood sows to raise children to get into the Army and be made into fertilizer. Which is, admittedly pretty inflammatory. The trial was a product not just of bad law, but also local politics. And, the political situation in North Dakota at the time. Did you know that there used to be a powerful progressive movement in North Dakota? It wasn't always a right-wing state. In fact, when I moved here, we had our entire congressional delegation was Democratic. But anyway, there were powerful progressive movements and, of course, very conservative movements at the time. And the conservatives used the Espionage Act to attack the progressives. O'Hare came to trial under a different judge than most of the cases in North Dakota, instead of Judge Amidon, which is funny because there's a town, the next town north of Bowman is called Amidon. She was tried under, I don't think there's a connection though. She was tried under Judge Wade, a far more conservative judge. The prosecution made its case on the basis of her quote, although most witnesses admitted they were not actually present at the speech. Whoops. Some of them were outside, not the most reliable witnesses. But hey, 1917. The defense blamed an attack by one Bowman faction on another. The conservative Phelan faction was led by a local banker named James Phelan. I might be mispronouncing his name. The progressives were named the Totten faction, which, interestingly, there's a Fort Totten in North Dakota, were led by Lillian Totten, postmaster, and her husband, Edward Totten, who at that time was the county judge in Bowman County. The Tottens were present at O'Hare's talk. So Phelan turned in Lillian Totten for misconduct, claiming she had acted improperly by applauding the speech. But in Fargo, she was found to have done nothing wrong. See, he was trying to get her out as postmistress. And hopefully get that judge out, too. So he went after O'Hare. The judge's instructions to the jury were very pointed. Even though no one of draft age was present at the speech, he pointed out that parents could influence their children. So O'Hare remained free on bail and continued speaking until 1919, until, pressure was brought and, okay, we got to sentence her, even though it was all silly. But during that year she spent in jail, she experienced the horrific conditions of the penitentiary. The war was over by the time she was released, so she found something new to campaign for. She began to campaign for prison reform and for the release of other prisoners who were taken under this same act. After 2 months protesting outside the White House, then President Warren Harding met with he's got his own story, but let's not go there. Then President Warren Harding met with the protesters, and he finally released those prisoners. So I just found that interesting. I put a number of links down below, several scholarly papers and things. It just was an interesting story. And really, she went to jail because of local politics in an area she wasn't even from. Check my Ooh, not a lot of battery left. So we'll make this short and sweet. So anyway, I just thought it was an interesting story and worth bringing up. And it also illustrates the other side, which is that you can limit free speech in a dangerous way and then use it as a weapon. And I'm not an absolutist on anything. There are limits to free speech. They called it the Espionage Act. There is a reason espionage is a crime, but there are also things that are not espionage. And this is an example of a bill that became a law that went too far. And of course, such a law, and we would include the Sedition Act, which is also interesting to read about, we would argue that those laws went too far. And of course, they were put in a stressful moment in our nation's history when we were at war. We've seen that happen time and again in our nation's history, and I'm sure the United States is not the only country who's done stupid things during war fever. We've got some newer laws that have been passed in the United States that are just a bit questionable. But I just thought it was a good counterpoint to the whole my criticism of social media, because I brought up Russia at the beginning because what's Russia done? They've blocked access to things like Twitter and Facebook and I don't know what all, but several different things. And why? They don't want their people learning what's going on in Ukraine. And you see governments like that do this exact thing. Do you think in North Korea you can jump on Twitter? Of course not. China? There's a lot of countries that limit this. Now, again, you can defame people. Social media can be used for bad. Free speech can definitely be used for ill. So I'm not an absolutist at all. When you start defaming people's character, that can get dangerous. We have people responding to teachers who are trying to support their LGBT students by calling them pedos or groomers. A little too far there. How about deal with the actual issue? Because people hear that and they think, oh, that teacher's a pedophile, or that teacher's a groomer, and they actually take it seriously, and you get threats made. There's a reason that people can get in trouble for incitement to violence. So I'm not an absolutist. I'll be honest, I was not present at Kate O'Hare's speech, so I don't know exactly what was said. But I just thought it was interesting that first that her speech was weaponized, and second of all, I thought it was interesting that somebody was arrested for sedition in a small town in southwestern North Dakota, because I live in southwestern North Dakota. So, hope you enjoyed that. Next week, I have another hopefully interesting story. I have a big, long article to read. I'll be talking about the Indian day schools, or Indian boarding schools, as they were then called, and the federal government's recently released report on those. So that's a 106-page document I got to read and take notes on for next week. So I better stop talking, get to reading and taking notes. So I want to thank you for watching. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.